I never thought that one day my own child would allow cruelty to take place in his own house. That afternoon, I stopped by just to bring a cake that I had trembled to bake with my own hands, a small gift of motherhood, a love that a mother never stops giving. But when I stepped into the backyard, I suddenly stopped. Between the sound of glasses and laughter, I heard Nicole's voice, sharp as a knife. "What is she alive for?" Those words hit my heart more than any slap. And my son, Stephen, he stood there, beer glass in hand, silent. He didn't even bother to look at me. I smiled slightly, even though my heart was broken. Not because I didn't hurt, but because in that moment, I knew I was silent for too long. They thought I was worthless. They were wrong. My name is Evelyn Mitchell. I was 67 years old, though the mirror often showed me a different story, a face full of traces of sacrifice and silent suffering. Her chestnut hair was now pale and white, curling into soft curls around her face that was already more tired than I wanted to admit. My chestnut brown eyes, they say, still retain their warmth, but lately they have concealed a tiredness that is hard to remove. I was widowed early. Mark, my only partner, passed away too soon. When he died, I raised my only son, Stephen, alone. I worked 2 jobs, a librarian during the day and a waitress at night, often returning home when Stephen was asleep. There are nights when I fast so that my child is full. My shoes are always in front of my mother's jacket. The money for college, before the medicine for my sore back. That's the kind of mother I was and still is, that is. Stephen was now a tall, 34-year-old, ambitious man. It built a career in real estate, rose rapidly, and I'm proud, immensely proud, even as the gap between us grows. I used to think that success would bring him happiness, but instead, it seemed to make him more restless, always wanting more. Then Nicole appeared. 31 years old when he married Stephen. Beautiful, sharp tongue, perfect hair at all times, eyes sometimes attractive, sometimes cold. At first, I greeted her with all the warmth, hoping that my son would be happy. I gave her my mother's heirloom chiffon wedding scarf, a treasure I have always kept, hoping that she would treat me as family. But soon, I realized I was just a shadow in her eyes. Too quiet, too backward, too troublesome. After Mark died, Stephen and Nicole invited me to stay in the guest house. I think that's kindness. I am grateful, believing that I can still be near my child, still belong to this place. But over time, I felt the change. The dinners were empty of my chair. Family photos lack my shadow. Forgotten birthdays. And Nicole's words, sweet in front of everyone, but sharp in private. "Evelyn, you don't need to cook, really. We don't. I don't need casseroles all day." Her smile never touched her eyes. And Stephen, my son, was silent. That silence hurt more than any of Nicole's words. I told myself that I just needed time to adapt, that if I kept quietly helping, being patient, even making myself invisible, then they would want me to stay. But the truth is becoming clearer. I am no longer a guest. I am a burden. I swallowed the pain, quietly took it, because that's what mothers do. We endured. We sacrifice. We wait for a little bit of love, even if our hearts crave more. But as I stood in the courtyard that day, hearing Nicole laugh at me that I was alive for, I suddenly realized something I had never thought about in my life. This is no longer a matter of patience or sacrifice. This is a matter of dignity. And for the first time in so many years, I felt the strength within me begin to rise. At first, I told myself Nicole didn't mean it. Maybe she was tired. Maybe she just needed space. But as weeks turned into months, her words sharpened and her smiles thinned until there was no kindness left to pretend with. It began with little exclusions. Family dinners where I'd set the table only to be told, "Oh, we actually have plans tonight." Phone calls that went unanswered. Birthdays that passed like any other day. without a candle or a card. I would spend hours baking cookies for the kids' chocolate chip, their favorite, just to see Nicole sweep the tray into the trash with a wrinkle of her nose. We don't feed them sugar crap, Evelyn. Try to keep up with modern parenting. Her voice was honeyed when guests were around. Oh, Evelyn is just the sweetest, always fussing in the kitchen. But once the doors closed, her tone shifted like a knife against my skin. One evening, as I carried in a casserole, she laughed to her friends. She's like a ghost in the corner, just floating around with her dishes. The laughter that followed burned into my chest. Stephen stood by, silent as ever, sipping his drink. Not one word to defend me. I excused myself to the bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the cold tile floor. I pressed a trembling hand against my mouth to muffle the sobs. I couldn't let them hear. I couldn't give them the satisfaction. But in that small, locked room, I felt the weight of all the years pressing down on me. The nights of double shifts, the shoes I went without, the meals I skipped, all for a son who now couldn't be bothered to look me in the eye. And still, I told myself to endure. Because that's what mothers do. We endure. But deep inside, a voice faint, fragile, whispered, "How much longer?" Vietnamese translation. At first, I told myself Nicole didn't mean to. Maybe she's tired. Maybe she just wants her own space. But then, as the weeks went by, her words became sharper, and her smiles became thinner, to the point where there was no more kindness to pretend. It all starts with small omissions. The family dinners I had finished arguing, and then I heard the words, "Well, we have other plans tonight." Calls are never answered. The birthdays passed quietly, like any other day. No cakes, no cards. I spent hours baking cookies for the kids' chocolate chips, their favorite only to see Nicole toss the tray in the trash with a wrinkled nose. "We're not going to feed the kids that, Evelyn. Try to catch up with modern parenting." Her voice is sweet when there are guests. Oh, Evelyn is so cute, always busy in the kitchen. But when the door closed, the voice was like a blade cutting into my flesh. One evening, when I brought out the casserole, she laughed at her friends. She's like a ghost in the corner, always wandering around with my food. The laughter then burned my chest. Stephen still stood there, as always, silent, sipping his glass. Without a word of protection for me, I made an excuse to go to the toilet, locked the door, and sat down on the cold brick floor. I pressed my trembling hand to my mouth to suppress my sobs. I can't let them hear. I can't give them that satisfaction. But in that small room, I could clearly feel the weight of all the years that had passed. Nights working 2 shifts, shoes I never bought, the meals I fast for my child to keep his stomach full. All because a child now doesn't bother to look at me in the eyes. Yet I still told myself to endure, because that's what mothers do. We endured. But deep down, a voice weak, fragile, whispered, "How much longer will it take?" The whispers gradually turned into public laughter. Every time I entered the room, the laughter stopped only for a moment and then continued, sharper, as if I hadn't noticed. But I realized. A mother who always recognizes. One Sunday, I brought the cookie tray to the patio, where Stephen and Nicole were entertaining some of Stephen's coworkers. I hoped to make a good impression and, perhaps, remind my son of the mother who raised him. Nicole's gaze swept over me, then stopped on the tray. She tilted her head with a smile that made me more and more afraid. "Oh, Evelyn, you don't have to work so hard. We generally do not serve old-style dishes like this. What do people like? Fresher." The whole group giggled. My hands trembled, but I smiled wryly and put the tray down. No one touched it. Later, as I quietly cleared the tray of cakes, I heard a friend of Nicole's whisper, "Is she still here? Doesn't she have her own place?" Nicole smiled slightly. She likes to pretend that she is still needed. It's a pity. Stephen didn't say a word. Without a word. That night, I sat alone in the guest house, staring at the boxes I had begun to pack, just in case I needed to go urgently. I tried to hold back my tears, but they were still flowing, hot and bitter. The next morning, I saw a stack of my belongings neatly stacked right in front of the door. At the top is a piece of paper written in Nicole's soft handwriting. "We need space. I hope you understand." I held the paper for a long time. The blurred words passed through the tears. My son passed by to get to the car. I'm waiting for him to say something, whatever. He didn't even bother to look at me. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just being ignored, I'm being erased. It was clear that day, a kind of light that seemed to tease the storm that was rolling up in my heart. I had just finished folding Stephen's shirts, as I had done since he was a little boy. Old habits are hard to break, even if no one notices. Nicole appeared at the door, her figure glaring in the sunlight. Her arms were curled, her lips curled into a thin and deliberate smile. "Evelyn, we've already decided. The guest house will be converted into my yoga room. You need to move out before the end of the week." The words fell, gently and coldly, as if she was just asking me to give her a jar of salt. I blinked, gripped the shirt so tightly that the fabric was wrinkled in my hand. "Clear. Let's go?" I said quietly, as if I could put it into words, things might be different. She tilted her head, pretending to sympathize. "You can manage it. You've always been like that, haven't you? Evelyn is strong little girl." Behind him, Stephen appeared. My heart jumped for a moment. Sure, my son would protect me. But his eyes were still glued to the floor. "Stephen?" My voice trembled. A hope turned into a plea. He moved uncomfortably, cleared his throat slightly. "Mother, that would be better." The shirt slipped out of my hand. My knees seemed to be soft, and the ground under my feet seemed to collapse. Nicole stepped closer, lowered her voice. But the cruelty didn't diminish. "She has been clinging to it long enough. We deserve our own lives. Don't make this any more difficult." That night, they packed up my rest. I stood and watched as Nicole's nails-painted hands closed the lid, containing pieces of my life, the blanket I sewed after Mark's death, my mother's porcelain separator, Stephen's kindergarten drawings. Each item is a memento, and each one is stuffed into the cardboard bin like garbage. Late in the afternoon, I stood next to 2 suitcases and a box of old photo albums. The setting sun dyed the sky bright red, but all I saw was the coldness in Stephen's eyes as he avoided looking at me. It doesn't come out to help. It didn't come out at all. From the open window, I heard Nicole's laughter, resounding, triumphant, and the sound of the glass touching. The sound pierced me deeper than any blade. A neighbor walked by, slowing down a moment when he saw me. She was about to say something, but then quickly turned her face away and hurriedly walked away. The humiliation is hotter than the pain. I was no longer Evelyn, the strong mother. I am Evelyn, the outcast. I pulled my suitcase to the side of the road, waiting for a taxi. The streetlights came on gradually, and with each light, I felt a piece of my old life fall off. The taxi driver looked at me through the mirror as I loaded my things into the car. He didn't ask anything, but the silence said it all. I sat in the back seat, hugging Stephen's picture frame as a kid, the boy who used to run into my lap after every class, his tiny arms wrapped around me. My tears fell quietly on the photo glass. When I arrived at the small rented room, I hardly recognized myself in the cracked mirror above the wooden table. The wallpaper was peeling, the bed creaked with every breath, and the fireplace hissed angrily as if it didn't want me to be there. I sat on the edge of the bed, exhausted, hugging the frame. My body trembled with the weight of the betrayal, but the tears, however hot, began to dry up. And in that silence, something lit up in my heart. Not exactly angry, not yet. It's something more solid, a ray of light. They thought they had erased me, but actually, they just woke me up. The first nights in that small rented room were the most difficult. The walls seemed to close around me. The fireplace hissed like an angry ghost, and the street outside was never quiet. I lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling, wondering how I had come to this point. Evelyn Mitchell, who had been the heart of the family, was now a lonely tenant in a building that smelled of old paint and was lonely. But gradually, silence is no longer a torture, but a companion. I started going for a walk every morning, breathing in the cool air, watching the sun rise over the city where no one knew my name. At first, it was strange not to have to cook for anyone, not to fold clothes for anyone, not to wait for a call that never came. Yet, in that void, I found something unexpected: peace. One afternoon, as I opened the last box, I discovered an envelope hidden deep in the document Mark had left years ago. My hands trembled when I opened it. Inside was a life insurance policy that had never been won, worth more than anything I ever dreamed of. Mark took care of me, even when he was away. For the first time in months, my tears fell, not out of sadness, but out of gratitude. I quietly took the money and moved to a small house in a nearby town. White shutters, a beautiful piece of garden, and a swinging swing stuck in the wind. Simple, but my own. I started volunteering at the local library, amidst the smell of old books and the crunchy laughter of the children during storytelling time. I made friends, women who listened, laughed, and reminded me that I was still alive, still needed. I started laughing again. It is no longer an awkward smile in the backyard every day, but a real smile. And then, late at night, when the wind shook the shutters, I hugged an old photo of Mark and whispered, "They think they've erased me. But you and I both know the truth, because deep down in my heart, I understand. This is not just the beginning of peace. This is the beginning of something greater." Months had passed since the day I left that house. The season changes the leaves, and I change too. I no longer recognized the weak woman who had stood on the side of the road that day, hugging the box of photo albums like the last buoy. I rebuilt myself. Her gray hair, once in tatters, now sparkles in the sun. I walked with my shoulders straight, my chin held high, not out of pride, but out of dignity. One afternoon, I heard rumors around town about Stephen's real estate company. A failed project. Investors withdraw capital. The lawsuit is pending. Nicole's store, which she once bragged about, is now embroiled in a scandal, accused of selling counterfeit goods. The couple that once seemed invulnerable is now gradually collapsing, piece by piece. And so, one bright Monday morning, I walked into Stephen's office. The receptionist looked at me in surprise, almost imperceptibly, in her neat coat and shiny shoes. I smiled gently. "Tell Stephen that his mother is coming." When I walked in, Stephen looked up from his desk, strewn with papers. His face was emaciated, dark circles under his eyes. Nicole sat on the sofa, pretending to be attentive to her phone, but I could clearly see her stiff shoulders. For a moment, a heavy silence encompassed. Then Stephen's voice rang out, trembling, almost like a baby. "Mother, what did you come here for?" I lightly placed a file on his desk. Inside were flyers about the community programs I was supporting: literacy classes, shelters for single mothers, food drives. "I want you to see what you've done," I said quietly. "My life has been built. Good things can still grow out of pain." Nicole snorted lightly, rolling her eyes. "So you came to show off?" I turned around, my voice calm but firm. "No, Nicole. I'm here to remind you that respect is an option, a choice that you two have rejected me, but I will always choose to give." Stephen's eyes blurred. He pursed his lips, then fell silent again. I smiled slightly, straightening up more than ever. "This is not revenge," I said, my voice firm but gentle. "This is enlightenment. Having said that, I left, leaving them in silence, a silence that was heavier than any insult they had ever given me. The news spread quickly. My quiet comeback, the charity work, the smile that appeared in the local newspaper, was in stark contrast to the headlines about Stephen's company in debt and Nicole's store being investigated. One evening, when I locked the library door after the volunteer session, I found them waiting on the stairs. Stephen's suit is wrinkled. The tie is loose. Nicole wore perfect makeup as always, but her eyes denounced sleepless nights. "Mom," Stephen began, his voice lowered. "We need help." I was silent for a moment. I looked at their faces, clearly seeing the despair hidden behind the arrogance. I remember the day I stood in front of their house, hugging my suitcase, waiting for a goodbye that never came. "What kind of help?" I asked quietly. Nicole interjected, too hurried. "Money, of course. Only until the lawsuits are resolved. You're more than strong, we know you can." I smiled faintly. It's true that I've been blessed by heaven lately, but I don't give money to feed my pride. I just give money to keep hope alive. Her jaw tightened. "You can't just watch us collapse like this." I looked straight, calm but tough. "The day I stood on the porch with my suitcase, you two didn't care how I collapsed." Stephen bowed his head in his hands. "We were wrong, Mom. Please." I pulled out a flyer from my pocket and handed it to Stephen, the address of a charity kitchen and housing assistance program. "This is something I can give," I said quietly. "Dignity, if you choose, but not extravagant. Not anymore." Nicole snatched the paper, her face flushed with anger. "So is this your way of revenge? Make us beg?" I shook my head slowly. "No, Nicole, this is not revenge. This is fair." And as I walked into the cool night, I heard a crackling sound in Nicole's voice, the sound of a woman realizing she was out of control. Week after month, their world crumbles, piece by piece. Stephen's real estate company declared bankruptcy. Investors who used to be entertained by it in luxury restaurants now don't bother to pick up the phone. The once admired name is now left with pity or worse, contempt. Nicole is no better. Her shop was closed after the investigation confirmed the allegations. The woman who once proudly strode in branded shoes now stands behind the counter of a retail store, a wry smile, pride slipping with each transaction. One chilly autumn afternoon, I was invited to speak at a women's conference. I stood on stage, my voice firmly telling the story of my life of sacrifice, of betrayal, and of reconstruction. The audience listened silently, then stood up and applauded in unison. At the end of the auditorium, I caught a glimpse of Stephen. His shoulders stooped, his eyes shining on something I hadn't seen in a long time: humility. Next to her, Nicole sat stiffly, her lips tightly pursed, as if a round of applause could break her. After that, Stephen approached. His voice trembled. "Mother, I don't deserve forgiveness, but I still beg you." I looked at it for a long time, letting the memories of white nights, empty birthdays, humiliations quietly rush back. Then I gently touched his hand. "Forgiveness is a gift, Stephen, and the gift must be given." Nicole turned away, muttering something, but I didn't chase after her. There are lessons. The world will teach itself for me. When I stepped outside, the autumn breeze was cool. I felt more relieved than ever, not because they suffered, but because I chose my own peace. This is never a matter of revenge. This is a matter of reclaiming my value. And in the end, I won it back, not with anger, but with altruism. Life has a strange twist, not to erase the pain, but to show us who we have become from within it. It was late spring when Stephen showed up at my little house. The cloves in the garden have just begun to bloom. The fragrance wafts in the breeze into the open window. I was taking care of the flowers when I saw her standing in front of the gate, her shoulders down, her hands deep in her pants pockets. He was no longer the confident man who had stood shoulder to shoulder with Nicole. It's like the boy I grew up with, lost, insecure, silently begging for comfort. I hesitated, my heart stretched between anger and love. Then I opened the gate. We sat at the small kitchen table, which I had polished hundreds of times to find something normal. The tea vapor rose up, rolling into the air. We were silent for a long time. Finally, Stephen whispered, "Mom, I'm sorry. For all. I didn't protect you. I didn't fulfill my duty as a son." Those words broke in me not more pain, but liberation. His eyes were watery, and this time, I didn't hide my tears either. "Stephen," I said quietly, "silence can hurt more than words, but silence can also heal. I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because you deserve peace." A week later, Nicole arrived. She didn't knock on the door right away. She stood hesitantly on the porch, glancing through the window as if she wasn't sure she had a place there. When I opened the door, she stood stiff, her arms crossed, but her eyes tired. Dark circles spoke for themselves. "I don't expect you to forgive," she muttered. "I was cruel. I know that now. And maybe I'm sorry not for the right reasons. But I'm really sorry." The words are bumpy, but true. I quietly stepped aside. For the first time, she walked into my house, not as a winner, but as a guest. We sat together, full of embarrassment at first. The silence was dense, containing long years that had never been spoken. Then, slowly, she asked about the garden. I told about the roses planted in memory of Mark. In that brief moment, she listened without judgment, and I saw that she was no longer a sharp-tongued woman, but a young wife who had once lost in pride. I didn't invite them to live with me. This little house is a shelter that I rebuilt with my own hands. But I let them sit at the table, drink a cup of tea together, and start small things, like healing. On Sundays, Stephen came more often. Sometimes it carries little food. Sometimes it just sits quietly in the garden. Nicole turned back slowly, but she came. And each time, the walls between us became a little thinner. Forgiveness does not erase the past. The scars are still there, deeply etched, a reminder of what silence and cruelty can do. But forgiveness brings me peace. And I realize that peace is more precious than any revenge. One afternoon, as the golden sunset poured into the small garden, I sat on the swing that Mark had built. Stephen sat next to him, quietly, watching the cloves sway. Nicole sat a few steps away, sipping a cup of tea. Not perfect. It will never be perfect. But that's enough. I thought of Mark, of his smile, of his firm hands, and of the trust he had always placed in me. I whispered softly into the fading light. "They thought they could knock me down, but it is love. Have raised me, and for the first time in so many years, I felt complete." If there's one truth that this journey engraves in my heart, it's this. The value of a mother can't be erased. Not by silence, not by cruelty, not by betrayal. For many years, I believed that love meant giving until there was nothing left in me. I thought that if I kept folding my shirts, baking cakes, smiling in the midst of the pain, then eventually I would be seen. I will be appreciated. But instead, I disappeared into the very roof I had erected with my hands. It took to lose everything: the roof, the presence of my son, the family I thought I had, for I realized that I had never lost myself. I'm still here. I'm still Evelyn. And Evelyn is still valuable. I learned that silence can be both a prison and a key. The silence that once made me invisible now gives me strength, allows me to hear my heartbeat again. To all the mothers, every woman sitting in a quiet room tonight, maybe in a rented apartment that is too small, maybe by an old kitchen table that has been imprinted over the years, please remember, you are not invisible. You are not thrown away. And you are not defined by how others treat you. You are the one who keeps the stories, the one who builds the roof, the silent power behind the laughter and tears. You are the love that keeps the world standing, even when no one says thank you. Forgiveness, I realize, is not surrender, nor is it pretending to be an unprecedented pain. Forgiveness is when we choose to put on a burden that we should never have carried. Forgiveness is not for those who have hurt us, it is for ourselves. Let me breathe again, laughed again, laughed again, living again. There will be people who will never see your worth until life takes away from them illusions. And there will be days when you feel like you're just a shadow of the old self. But remember, the shadow only exists because there is light. If you sit there tonight, your eyes watery, hugging painful memories more than patting them, please hear me. You are braver than silence. You are stronger than the pain. And you deserve worthy of love, respect, and peace. Because in the end, what heals us is not revenge. It's love. Love is quiet. Love endures. Love begins from our own heart. And if my story leaves you with anything, it's this. Never let anyone convince you that you're worthless. You are the heart of your life story. And it's never, never too late to write a new ending. Thank you, from the bottom of my heart, for accompanying me through this story. Your time, your listening, and your open heart mean more than any words I can say. Stories like mine are not just my own. They belong to all the mothers, women, and human beings who have ever felt like they were not seen, heard, or loved. When you listen, when you empathize, you not only appreciate my story, but also honor the courage and love within yourself. I hope you carry this message, that love, dignity, and forgiveness will never be out of reach, even if you feel too late, even if you think you're too broken. Thank you for letting me share a part of my life with you. And please remember, it's never too late to write a new ending for yourself. If this story touches your heart, I look forward to hearing from you. Have you ever had a moment when you felt neglected, not seen, or appreciated? Write down your thoughts or stories in the comments. Who knows, your words will become a source of comfort and strength for someone in need. And if you believe this message can help a loved one, share this video with them. Together, we can create a community where love, understanding, and compassion are always present. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you want to keep listening to stories like this. Stories of love, energy, and silent power that can change a whole life.